Okay.
So, my name is Pastor Carol Gates, and I'm the pastor at Lamb of God Lutheran Episcopal Church in Fort Myers, Florida. And this is an interview with Deanna Boddie for the Good News Now. So, Deanna, welcome. We are so glad that you are with us this morning. Actually, it's afternoon already. Um, but what I've started to do with many people is to start with reading their horoscope. And this horoscope comes from the Good News Network, which is really a website. And it's a great place to go if you really want to be filled with good news. And they have something called the Free Will Astrology. And it's done by an astrologist, Rob Bresney. And it's pretty fascinating stuff. I don't read these in advance because I like to be surprised just like everybody else does. And you've just told me that you are Aquarius because your birthday is actually Thursday,
Yes.
February 11th.
Mhm.
So this is what they say about you. Aquarian author Alice Walker writes, in nature, nothing is perfect and everything is perfect. Trees can be contorted, bent in weird ways, and they're still beautiful. In the coming weeks, Mr. Breesney hopes you'll adopt that way of thinking and apply it to every aspect of your perfectly imperfect body and mind and soul. I hope you'll give the same generous blessing to the rest of the world as well. This attitude is always wise to cultivate, of course, but it will be especially transformative for you in the coming weeks. It's time to celebrate your gorgeous idiosyncrasies and eccentricities.
Yes, I like it.
I have had and been incredibly blessed to spend a lot of time with you over the course of the last several years that I've been here at Lamb of God. And um, I would love to say that that was because, I could go out and visit all the people because that's what I like to do. But unfortunately, it often comes because, somebody's in the hospital, somebody's sick, and that's exactly what happened with Jim being in the hospital. And for me, the Jim being your husband, for those people who don't know that you're 745 people at Lamb of God. It's a very small populace at 745 in the morning.
Right.
But you both, first of all, are extremely tall, so you stand out a lot in the midst of the church service. And I always look up to people. When I can look up to somebody and they're my height, I am like, wow, okay. So that's also how we got to know each other. And then, of
Right.
course, again, spending a lot of time with you, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Just all the time we got to spend together and talk and
Yeah.
learn more about you and your life. I don't think, though, I really have the answer to this. I know that you have a doctorate, and Jim also had a doctorate, but I don't know what your doctorate is in.
My
Or
doctorate is in education, which is um, kind of interesting in itself. I really was dragged into education, kicking and screaming. I really didn't want to do it, but back in my day, women were nurses and teachers.
sorry.
My mother thought I should go to beauty school.
I see how far that carried you, right?
Yeah,
Not a
I said,
chance.
Mom, I can't do that. I don't like cutting hair. So that's how I ended up in education. And then I became, by the way, along the last 15 years of my working career, I worked till I was 70. Then I was a university professor. And I helped students get their PhDs in
Hmm.
education. So I read a lot of dissertations online.
Oh.
And that got to be very, very rewarding and very tiring.
Hmm.
So when I got tired, I had to leave, and that was 70. And then I said,
Okay. Right. So that
I'll
would be
find,
about we met probably right when you had retired.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And
Okay.
then shortly after that, about a year after that, Jim became very ill. He'd always had some, medical conditions, but he had an emergency colon surgery on top of some already somewhat debilitating medical situations, but nothing that he couldn't navigate. But the colon surgery in 2019 put him in the hospital for 120 days. He came home for 8 months. He was starting to turn the corner. He was really doing well. And we made a trip up to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville to do our annual physical. And he took a spill at a gas station and crushed 2 of his vertebrae in his back. And that was debilitating, painful. And so what happened there was he started going through rehab and therapy and medications. He was starting to turn the corner and the pandemic hit. And all rehab was shut down. And within 3 months, Jim started developing fluid in his lung and lots of other conditions, rapid weight loss for which they could find they didn't know what was going on. He couldn't absorb protein. So he was admitted to the hospital in July 7th. And 85 days later, he died. He died with COVID. He didn't get it until he was in the hospital. And he was in a weakened state at that point. And, so that's how that happened.
Yeah.
A very, very long and painful journey for him.
Mm-hmm.
And for me and for all of the family.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the midst of it, from the outsider looking in, and I know how hard it was on both you and Jim, yet you both, I don't want to use the word cliche, kept the faith, but you did. And the deep conversations that were had during that time with both of you are some of the memories that I will carry with me forever, because it was eye-opening. It was learning. It was a reality check for me about what life is like for an interracial couple.
Yeah.
And the honesty with which you both just talked about your life and your journey together. For me, I felt like a voyeur at some points, just being part of it, and I'm grateful for that time. Totally grateful for it.
And that goes 2 ways, Carol, because we're grateful for you.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, from the bottom of my heart.
And I know that. I said that good memories. And you both talked a lot about the books that you were reading. So that was also fascinating to me, just to be able to hear. So I would love for you to share, as you started out, what are you reading?
Well, I think what I've been seeing from the videos that you've been doing is you've asked people, what is the good news that you can find in this pandemic? And especially for me, when I've lost my dearly beloved, and I've had family members that have had COVID and have been sick. So it hasn't just even been Jim, it's been other people I've been worried about, and I'm in lockdown over here and no vaccine in sight yet. So yeah, it's been hard, but there is so much good news, so much good news. I could never do this without God, without Jesus in my life. Couldn't. So, I have 3 different things that I want to say about good news. Okay, and then we can, and I'll try not to be too long. But this is the teacher in me, Carol. I can't help it,
That's all right.
The first book is the hardest one for me to talk about because it was a book that I read. It's called, I don't know if everybody can see it. Can you see that?
How We Die.
How We Die by Sherwin Newland. Was written 25 years ago. He's no longer living, but he won lots of recognition for this book because it is really a wonderful read about what we go through when somebody we love is dying or when we're dying. And I just wanted to read you the end of it because it was so helpful to me to understand and to live with the very painful way that Jim died. I could not see him or touch him for 85 days before he died. And for somebody that had been at every doctor's appointment and at every hospital setting, it was really, really difficult. But here's what he has to say. He says, we die so that the world may continue to live. We die so that others may live. All this makes more precious each hour of those we have been given. It demands that life must be useful and rewarding. If by our work and pleasure, our triumphs, our failures, each of us is contributing to an evolving process of continuity, not only of our species, but of the entire balance of nature, the dignity we create in the time allotted to us becomes a continuum with the dignity we achieve by the altruism of accepting the necessity of death. And here's what he says too. He goes on to say that, life is periods of pain. It's dappled with periods of pain and peace and joy. We have a tendency when people die to remember just the pain, that they suffered so much. And he says, if the classic image of dying with dignity must be modified or discarded, what is to be salvaged of our hope for the final memories we leave to those who love us? The dignity that we seek in dying must be found in the dignity with which we have lived our lives. The art of dying is the art of living. The honesty and grace of the years of life that are ending is the real measure of how we die. Who has lived in dignity dies in dignity.
Wow.
And I know for sure that my husband lived a life of dignity, a search for social justice, and he died with dignity.
Yes, he did.
And I hope that I have the same kind of courage that he had. He showed me how to die. And that was amazing. So I got through that one. That was hard.
Well, it's Deanna, again, the voyeur that's watching and been watching all this. Indeed, Jim died with dignity. And that dignity is also a part of you. It's a part of the both of you. It's a marriage that dignity was intertwined with one another. I don't know how to explain that, except I got to watch it. I got to watch it, and it's hard to express when a couple is just so in tune with one another as you two were in tune with each other. That's what I'm trying to say. That it absolutely, yeah.
That's why life without him is so challenging. It really is. But I want to say something else too for all the viewers out there. We have plenty of people in our service who are elderly. So this book, Elderhood, is so cool. It's called Redefining Aging, Transforming Medicine, and Reimagining Life. And I'm just going to read you one thing out of it, just one little short quote, because the author of this book is Louise Aronson. She's a geriatric doctor in San Francisco. And this book is a delight because what she says to us is that the last third of our life is spent as an elderly person, the last third from 60 on. So we now have 30, 40 years in that phase of our life. And we need to develop a better attitude toward elderly people. Because she says, her point is that no matter how much we love elderly people, there is always, always condescension. And if you get to be this age, that's to be true. People mean well, but they still treat you very often like you're invisible. It's difficult sometimes. So you have to kind of be a little bit more aggressive and force your way in. But here's what she says. This is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who we've probably all heard of.
Yep.
She says, if we had the courage to think and reflect about life and death, we would raise our children differently. We would make death and dying a part of life again. And I grew up on the farm where that was very true. My grandparents died at home. We saw death every day on the farm with animals that died. It was just a part of life. And in a lot of ways, Carol, that has made it easier for me to get through this because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a book worth reading for elderly people. A lot of good advice about medicine too, about this over testing of elderly people that we're doing. 5 months without Jim has given me an opportunity to think about death and dying and living. And most of all, how much I need God, how much I need Jesus every day in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Every day.
So that is your good news. And
That's,
what are your hopes and dreams for Lamb of God as they move forward in ministry, mission, call, process, call of a new pastor?
well, I want the church to be as inclusive as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to love people of all races, creeds, disabilities, whatever. I think we have to be more accepting of each other. I'd really like to see that. And I would like to continue to, Jim used to always say to me, and I didn't really have an answer for him about this. He would say, why don't the churches speak up more when there's so much injustice in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, well, Jim, they are speaking up. And he'd say, yeah, where? And I'd give him examples and they say, oh, okay, well, but I think he had a point to some extent that the churches are us.
Mm-hmm.
So we all need to stand up. The government is us. We
Right.
need to stand up for justice,
Mm-hmm.
and to get rid of injustice in this world. That's what God would want us to do. I think for all of us, God created us in his image, and he built in us this conscience. We all have it.
Yeah.
It's all there inside of us. And so if we get still and listen to that, we know what's right and we know what's wrong.
Right.
And we just need to listen to that and act on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the hope that I have for all of us, because we are created in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hope, that we can do the right thing.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Deanna, for being here with us today and sharing the good news now. We are so appreciative of your time, and you're sharing your story of loving Jim as well. So
Thank you.
this is Pastor Carol Gates signing off for the Good News Now.